Es un gran honor de poder presentar al Congreso
It's a
Futuro.
great honor to be able to
Thank
speak
you.
here in Congreso Futuro.
My talk is going to turn standard biology upside down, because I'm going to tell you that, contrary to what we have been taught for the last 80 years approximately, genes are not the blueprint for life. And then I will finish with some comments on the implications of that for the future of humanity. So first, why are genes not the blueprint for life? And how did 20th century biology get this so completely wrong, all the way from the sequencing of the understanding of DNA as the location of genes? I wrote just a year ago, by invitation of the top science journal, Nature, a review of a little book. And the title of my talk was precisely the title of my talk to you today, that genes are not the blueprint for life. That's the top science journal asked me to present that. I didn't have to argue for it. And the reason is this article that appeared at about that time in one of the main medical journals, that the association scores from genomes do not predict major factorial diseases. So how did the genome become described as the book of life, creating us body and mind? That's a quote from Richard Dawkins' famous book, The Selfish Gene. Because if that were so, the conditional logic of life would have to be found in the genome. But if, as a computer programmer, and I do computer programming as well as being a biologist, if you look for where all of those, if this, then that, or the other, where all of those control routines are, you will not find them in the genome. There are switches in genomes. Every gene sequence has a region near it which can be activated or suppressed to control whether it is being read or not. But those switches are controlled by other processes occurring in the body. Where are they? We know where they are. I'm a physiologist, and I've been investigating them for over 60 years. Those processes are in the membranous structures of our living cells. This is a very complicated diagram. All you need to know is that there are membranes everywhere, on the surface of our cells, deep inside, forming all kinds of structures. Those membranes have got the protein channels in them that, in effect, are the conditional on-off processes. They are sensitive to the electrical, chemical, and other processes occurring in our environment. And without those membrane processes, there could not be choice. There's the humanity coming in. There could not be choice between different behavioral options. We wouldn't even know what it means to be a human. Furthermore, there are no genes coding for membranes. Yet all of those membrane structures are inherited by us from our mother's egg cell. So I'm now going to give you just a little bit of technical detail, but I'll keep it as simple as possible. These are the four main proofs why the 20th century gene-centric biology is wrong. First, the central dogma of molecular biology. It's actually a simple chemical fact. That's what Watson and Crick found, that DNA enables RNA to be made, which enables proteins to be made. And it's one way. You can't go back. That is totally correct. That's the correct version of the central dogma. But it does not prevent the organism from changing its genes when it needs to. What happened during the pandemic? A new virus appeared. Our immune systems detected it. And they immediately started telling a little part of the genome in the cells that create new immunoglobulins, please make new immunoglobulins with different genes. We were changing our genes. The second one is what's called the Weissman barrier. That's the idea that the body cannot pass on any of its experience to the germ cells, the future eggs and sperm. That's the Weissman barrier, and the idea is that stops any form of inheritance of what we experience to be passed on to the next generation. We've now found that control RNAs communicate body characteristics to the germ cells via tiny vesicles that come from all of the cells in our body. The extraordinary thing is this idea was first enunciated in the 19th century by Charles Darwin, long before people knew that tiny vesicles really exist. But he formulated that hypothesis. He's absolutely correct. The third dogma is that DNA replicates itself, like a crystal does. A crystal grows by molecules joining the crystal. It replicates, self-replication. The fact is that can be effective for a small virus, maybe 20 or 30,000 base pairs long. We humans have 3 billion base pairs. There would be close to 1 million errors if we relied on that process of self-replication. The fact is that we need the living cell and all its processes to correct those errors one by one. And every time our cells reproduce themselves to form new cells, all of that is proofread to make sure that it is correct. That means, therefore, that the final dogma, which is the idea that the replicator, DNA, is separate from its vehicle, the living cell, which is the message of the selfish gene, is simply incorrect. It cannot be possible because DNA on itself cannot self-replicate. Now I want to go on to why is this important? It's important because the economic and social costs are huge. First of all, there's the implication for medical science and the treatment of disease. The idea was very simple. Genome sequencing would deliver the goods that matter, new medical treatments. Where are they? 25 years after the first full sequencing of the genome. The idea was simple. Find the gene variant causing the disease, then replace or delete it. And the answer is an embarrassing no, it doesn't work. That is the paper I highlighted at the very beginning by Hingorani and his colleagues at University College London, checking whether what are called the polygenic scores, that's adding together all the gene correlations with disease, can predict major fatal diseases like cancer, heart disease, schizophrenia, and so on. The fact is that we were promised that would occur within 10 years of the full sequencing of the human genome. It's now 25 years on. We still haven't found those cures. So the association scores between the presence and the absence of most genes and the incidence of major diseases are said now to be very low. That's what the experiments have shown. And many geneticists, for that reason, and I'm amongst them, favor what is called the omnigenic idea, which is that all genes take a part in a holistic description of the whole organism. And the reasons is this. Most of the time, organisms manage very well, even in the absence of key genes and the proteins they enable to be made. I showed that in my own laboratory just around 30 years ago in the case of heart rhythm. We identified the protein channels and their genes involved in that mechanism. It's a beautifully backed up mechanism. If one of the processes doesn't work, one of the others hits in. That's why your heart continues to beat continuously throughout life. This kind of robustness is very general. It's a common feature of living processes. Furthermore, the economic costs of aging societies are beginning to be beyond what our health systems can deal with. Cancer, obesity, heart disease, vascular disease, dementia, Alzheimer are all in this category of being multiple genes involved in the process. Moreover, longevity is increasing in all developed nations. By 2050, it's predicted that there will be 500 million people in China over the age of 65. Similar proportions are predicted for the United States, for Europe, for Japan, Korea, many other developed countries. South America, here in Chile, you're amongst the highest already. 14% are already over 65. Argentina, 12%. Brazil, 11%. And so on. If we don't prepare for this, national health budgets will be completely overwhelmed. They will be insufficient. And on top of that, we face the economic consequences also of climate change. And don't we know that now? So how do we deal with the economic cost? We need a change also in our economics and business practices. Just last year, I and two very well-known economists and a management consultant wrote a little paper in the interdisciplinary journal of the Royal Society called Interface, exactly pointing out that we needed to change the economic process just as much as the interpretation of biology, because the equivalent to genetic determinism in biology is the hidden hand process in economics. Corporations can freely seek market profit like selfish individuals, regardless of the social consequences. And that won't work. The alternative is to copy the modern view of biology and of evolution, that is, to anticipate the social problems and incorporate them into business culture. So we need changes not only in our interpretation of biology, but also in many other walks of life. And I'm going to finish with the end statement from a little book that I published with my biology brother, Raymond Noble, just a year ago. It will require creative ingenuity to shift the culture of biology away from the misunderstandings of the 20th century. And it will be for a new generation to discover and create their own culture fit for the challenges of the 21st century. There were plenty of looming signposts to warn them what went wrong, because theirs will be a generation that may take responsibility for the way in which the Earth's ecosystems need rescuing, even for our own species to survive. Theirs will be the generation that faces the challenging of aging society, requiring medical science to find solutions to the diseases of old age that do not readily yield to reductionist gene-centric solutions, since those diseases are all multifactorial. Only an integrative approach that understands the interdisciplinary multifactorial interactions can possibly hope to address those diseases. Theirs will be a generation that can try to recover from the damage to society that results from reductionist models of biology and evolution that have metaphorically shaped ideas and models in fields as diverse as economics, sociology, philosophy, ethics, politics. The list goes on, because there's no aspect of today's society that can have escaped dogmas from the 20th century, like "we are born selfish." That's a quote from Dawkins' Selfish Gene. "They genes created us body and mind." Another quote from the Selfish Gene. And the myriad of other tropes and related types that we now use without thinking. How often do we simply say it's in his DNA? It may not be. If he's got schizophrenia, the chances are not. That's what we found. Those future generations will need to rewrite the textbooks. Not only because they see the virtue of, again, to quote Richard Dawkins, let us therefore teach our children to avoid the impact of our selfish genes, but also because their politicians, economists, sociologists and philosophers will also need to find new strategies in collaboration with biologists who can lead them out of the gene-centric impasse. It is arguably a challenge the scale of which human society has never faced before. And I finish with the last sentence of our little book. We wish them all well. Muchas gracias.